I'm 92 years old, and if I could sit across from the 30-year-old version of myself for just 5 minutes, I wouldn't talk about money or success or retirement. I'd ask him one simple question. Frank, exactly how many tomorrows do you think you've been promised? Because that's the lie that shaped my entire life. Not greed, not ambition, just the quiet belief that there would always be more time. More time to slow down. More time for my family. More time to say the things that mattered. By the time I realized I was wrong, most of those tomorrows had already disappeared. My name is Frank Whitmore. I was born in the spring of 1934, just outside Bozeman, Montana. When I close my eyes, I can still smell wet pine after a summer rain. I can still hear my mother's screen door slam shut and my father's pickup rattling down the gravel road every evening. We didn't have much. My father built houses with his hands. Honest work. Hard work. Some nights he'd come home so exhausted he could barely lift his coffee mug. But he always smiled when he saw me waiting on the porch. When you're a little boy, you believe your father can solve every problem in the world. Then one night I learned he couldn't. I was about 10 years old. My parents thought I was asleep. From the hallway, I heard my mother quietly counting bills at the kitchen table. After a long silence, she whispered, "John, we're not going to have enough this month." I peeked around the corner. My father didn't argue. He didn't get angry. He just stared at his hands. Hands cracked from years of building homes for other families. Then he said something I'll never forget. "I work every day, and it still isn't enough." That sentence changed my life. Standing there, in the dark, I made a promise. When I grow up, my family will never worry about money. At 10 years old, it sounded like love. Looking back, it was fear. And fear is a dangerous thing. It doesn't always tell you to run away. Sometimes it tells you to keep running long after you've forgotten where you were trying to go. I graduated high school in 1952 and went straight to work. College wasn't an option. Besides, I couldn't wait to earn my own paycheck. I hauled lumber, mixed concrete, carried shingles up ladders until my shoulders felt like they were on fire. I loved it. There was something satisfying about watching an empty field slowly become somebody's home. I'd stand back at the end of the day and think, a family is going to make memories inside those walls. Funny, isn't it? I spent my whole life building houses while slowly becoming a stranger inside my own. When I was 23, I met a young woman named Eleanor at the county fair. She wasn't the loudest girl there. She wasn't trying to get anyone's attention. She just had the kind of smile that made the whole world feel quieter. I walked over and introduced myself. To this day, I still can't remember what I said. Whatever it was, she laughed. Not at me, with me. That laugh became the sound of home. We got married the following spring. Our first apartment was tiny. The roof leaked when it rained. The refrigerator sounded like it was about to explode. Some weeks, we ate the same cheap meals 3 nights in a row because that's what we could afford. And somehow, those were some of the happiest years of my life. We'd sit by the window after dinner talking about the future. One day we'd buy a little house. One day we'd have children. One day life would be easier. We believed happiness was waiting somewhere ahead of us. Neither of us realized we were already living it. A few years later, our first son was born. I held him in the hospital and looked at his tiny little face. He wrapped his whole hand around one of my fingers. Right there, I whispered the same promise I'd made as a frightened little boy. You'll never have to worry about money. I meant every word. What I didn't understand was that children need far more than security. They need you. By then I'd started my own construction company. 1 truck became 2. 2 crews became 5. The phone never stopped ringing. Every new contract felt like proof that I was finally becoming the man I'd promised myself I'd be. People around town started calling me one of the hardest working men they'd ever met. I admit something I'm not proud of. I liked hearing that. Maybe a little too much. Every year I told Eleanor the same thing. Just one more project. Just one more busy season. Then life will slow down. I believed it every single time. So did she. Neither of us knew that one more year would quietly become 20. The strange thing about success is that it never announces when it's become an addiction. At first, I worked because I had to. Then I worked because I wanted to. Eventually, I worked because I didn't know who I was without it. The business kept growing. We hired more men, bought more trucks, took on bigger projects. People would shake my hand around town and say, "Frank, you've made it." I smiled every time I heard it. What I didn't realize was that every new success quietly demanded another sacrifice. 1 missed dinner became 2. A weekend at the office became normal. Birthdays were shortened. Anniversaries were postponed. I never meant to disappoint my family. I just kept believing I could make it up to them later. That's the dangerous part. Nobody chooses to miss their children's childhood. They just keep saying, after this project, after this season, after things settle down. But life doesn't settle down, it keeps moving. Whether you're paying attention or not, our boys grew faster than I could understand. One day they were asking me to push them on the backyard swing. The next, they were borrowing my tools to build tree houses. People warned me all the time, "Enjoy it, Frank. They grow up fast." I'd smile. I know. But I didn't know. Not really. Because if I had, I would have left work early a lot more often. One Friday afternoon, my oldest son walked into my office, carrying a folded piece of paper. I was studying blueprints spread across my desk. He waited quietly until I looked up. "Dad?" "Yeah, buddy? My baseball game's tomorrow." I smiled. "That's great." He hesitated. "Do you think you can come?" Without even thinking, I answered the way I always did. I'll try." He smiled and ran back outside. To him, those two words meant hope. To me, they were an easy promise. Saturday morning arrived. The game started at 10. At 9:30, my foreman called. There had been an accident at one of the job sites. Nobody was seriously hurt, but they needed me. I looked at the clock, grabbed my truck keys, and told myself, I'll catch the next game. I believed that. I honestly did. When I finally got home that evening, the sun was already setting. My son was sitting alone on the front porch, still wearing his baseball uniform. His cleats were dusty, his cap rested beside him. I sat down next to him. "So, how'd it go?" "We won." "That's wonderful. Did you get a hit?" He nodded. "Two." I smiled. "I'm proud of you." For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he looked out toward the road and quietly said, "I kept looking for your truck." That's all. No anger, no tears, no accusation. Just one honest sentence. "I kept looking for your truck." I've forgotten hundreds of contracts I signed. I've forgotten how much money those jobs made. But I have never forgotten those 6 words. Because in that moment, I realized my son hadn't cared whether we won or lost. He wasn't looking for a businessman. He wasn't looking for a provider. He was looking for his dad. I hugged him and apologized. I promised I'd be at the next game, and I truly meant it. But life has a cruel way of testing good intentions. Sometimes I made it. Many times I didn't. Years passed. The boys became young men. The house became quieter. And before I understood what was happening, the little hands that used to reach for mine no longer needed them. One evening I came home after another 14-hour day. Dinner was covered on the stove. Cold. The boys were already asleep. I found Eleanor sitting alone on the back porch, watching the sun disappear behind the hills. I sat beside her. For a while, we listened to the crickets. Then she asked me something I'll never forget. "Frank, do you know what I miss the most?" I smiled. "What?" She looked out across the yard and said, "I miss when we were poor." I laughed. "Poor, Eleanor. We could barely pay the rent back then." She nodded. "I know. Then why would you miss it?" She turned toward me. There wasn't anger in her eyes, only sadness. Then she said the sentence that stayed with me for the rest of my life. "Because back then, I had you." I wish I could tell you that Eleanor's words changed me overnight. They didn't. That's one of the hardest truths I've learned about people. Sometimes life gives us the answer, and we're too busy to hear it. I kissed her forehead, told her things would slow down after the current projects were finished. She smiled, the same gentle smile she'd given me for more than 30 years. And life went on, until it didn't. My best friend was a man named Jack. We'd known each other since we were boys. He was the kind of friend who could walk into your house without knocking and pour himself a cup of coffee. For years we'd talked about taking one last fishing trip together. Every few months he'd call. "How about next weekend?" I'd laugh. "After this project, Jack." he'd laugh too. One of these days, Frank, we both believed there would always be another chance. Then one Monday morning my phone rang. It was Eleanor. The moment I heard her voice, I knew. She quietly said, "Frank, Jack's gone. A heart attack." Just like that, he was 60 years old, strong, healthy, still making plans for retirement, still talking about all the things he'd do one day. There wasn't going to be a one day. A week later, I stood at his funeral. People talked about the houses he'd built, the jokes he'd told, the father he had been, the grandfather he loved being. As I looked around that little church, something hit me harder than grief. Nobody was talking about how many hours he'd worked. Nobody cared how much money he'd made. They remembered how he made them feel. On my way out, I hugged his wife. She held my hand for a moment and quietly said, "He always thought there'd be another summer." I couldn't stop thinking about those words. Another summer. That's how I'd lived my whole life. Always believing there would be another birthday, another vacation, another fishing trip, another chance to show up. But life doesn't promise another anything. It only gives us today. That evening I drove home without turning on the radio. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed the porch light glowing. Eleanor had left it on for me every night for decades. I walked inside. She looked up from her book and smiled. "You're home early." For the first time in my adult life, I didn't have an answer. I walked over, knelt beside her chair, and cried. Not because Jack had died, but because I suddenly understood how much of my own life I'd been absent from. I cried for the baseball games I'd missed, the birthdays I'd shortened, the dinners she'd eaten alone, the conversations we'd never had because I was always too tired. Eleanor wrapped her arms around me. She didn't blame me. She didn't say, "I told you so." She simply held me. Sometimes the greatest act of love isn't fixing someone's pain, it's giving them a safe place to feel it. The next morning, I did something that would have shocked the younger version of me. I left my phone on the kitchen counter. I made 2 cups of coffee, one for me, one for Eleanor. We sat on the porch and watched the sunrise. After a while, she smiled and said, "I'd forgotten what mornings with you felt like." That sentence hurt because I realized I'd spent decades trying to give my family everything except myself. These days my mornings are quiet. I drink my coffee slowly. I watch deer cross the field. I wave at my neighbors. Sometimes I sit for an hour and do absolutely nothing. Years ago, I would have called that wasting time. Now I call it living. People ask me what I'd tell the younger generation. I don't have 10 life lessons. I only have one. Don't spend your life preparing to live. Live it while it's happening. Go to the baseball game. Take the fishing trip. Eat dinner with your family while the food is still warm. Call your parents. Hold your wife's hand a little longer, because one day, without warning, you'll have your last ordinary Tuesday. You just won't know it's the last one. I'm 92 years old now. I've built beautiful houses. I've earned good money. I've lived a life I'm grateful for. But if I could trade every extra paycheck for one more afternoon with the people I love, I wouldn't hesitate. Not for a second. So when this video ends, don't think about me. Think about the people waiting for you. Put your phone down, step outside. Watch the sunset. Tell someone you love them, because the life you're working so hard to build may already be waiting for you at home.